Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hashtag No Limits. I am your host, Shelly Kino. Hashtag No Limits is about people whose society has placed limits upon, but who have busted through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet, "We know who we are, but not who we will be." And I believe that to be 100% true, and that there is no better example of that than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The caterpillar literally dissolves into its cells, and then it has to reform into the butterfly. That has to be incredibly challenging and difficult. And that's not enough, though. While it's in the cocoon, it still has to struggle in order to make its wings strong enough to fly once it gets out of the cocoon. None of that can be easy, but neither is busting through limits that society places upon a person. And today I am super excited because for anyone who has followed me for any amount of time, you know that I love to talk about behaviors. And today, my guest, Dayna Abraham, is like the guru of behaviors. And Dayna, I have to admit to you, I had to stop following you and getting like your stuff on a regular basis because I was so afraid because we think so much alike. I was so afraid that I was going to start using your stuff as my own stuff without realizing that I was doing that. And I definitely did not want to do that because you have an amazing program and I'm excited to talk about it today. So welcome, Dayna, and thank you for being on Hashtag No Limits.
Well, I am so excited to be here. And I believe that there is an abundance in this world. And so the more people that can get the message out, the better. I can't do the change that I want to do in this world all on my own. So, hey, like I said, the more the better.
Well, thank you. So, the first thing I think that drew me to you was the Calm the Chaos workshop. Now, I haven't actually gone through the workshop, but just actually, I take that back. I think I did years ago, like maybe at the beginning. And so, tell us about that, and tell us like how that started, what prompted that start, all the stuff.
Yeah, so I'll start all the way back at the beginning.
Okay.
I was born in, no, just kidding. Um, so basically, I was a classroom teacher. I went into teaching because it was my dream to open a school for kids that didn't quite fit. I didn't really know what it was going to look like or why I needed it. It's just a vision that I had. And so went into school, never thought I'd be in the classroom that long, 12 years into being in the classroom. And my son, my favorite kids before I had kids, my favorite kids were the ones that came with a long paper trail behind them, and the ones that struggled the most, the ones that the teachers talked about in the teachers lounge, the ones that they knew it. They knew they were the troublemakers, the ones that were too much, not enough, all of that sort of thing. And so when I had my own kid, I was like, I got this figured out. Like, I have taught some of the most challenging kids and helped them be successful, and I love them. And so it doesn't matter what my kid throws at me. I got this. But yeah, no, pie in the face. I felt like I was the worst parent in the world for the first 7 years of parenting. I just felt like an absolute failure. I was told all the things I was doing wrong, all the things I should be doing, all the firmer limits I should be setting, all of the traditional things that should work for most children. And I tried it all, and I tried all my teacher tricks, and it just didn't work. And so after being in the classroom for 12 going on 13 years, my son hit a point in his schooling where he was suspended more days than he was in school. We had gone through the process of getting an IEP, but there's this point in the IEP process where, and I'm saying IEP because I feel like your people know what it is, right? The individualized education plan. But there's a point in the process where it doesn't matter if you get the plan or not. You just kind of have a feeling that the school's not really going to support it. Yeah, they're going to like on paper do the things they need to do or whatever, but there was just a massive disconnect between what they believed, what we believed, and what my child needed. And so we decided at that point that it was best if I homeschool. And so I brought him home, and I really just had two goals. I wanted him to no longer hate himself for not fitting in. And I wanted him to not hate the world for not understanding him. And those were the two goals that I really set forth with in homeschooling him and with doing everything at home myself. And over the next, 5, 7 years, it was really a challenge. And we hit some of our lowest lows. And, all along I was kind of blogging about those highs and lows on our blog. But about 5 years ago, I started realizing that there were some things that were working in this really difficult path that we had been on. And I discovered that, in all of the trainings out there, in all of the amazing research, and even, the old way traditional parenting versus, the newer stuff, there were these best practices that were tried and true. And if you really just could boil things down to that, it would simplify parenting even the most challenging situations. And so that's where Calm the Chaos was born out of, was sharing what I had learned in a succinct and manageable way. And they are based on best practices, but also some of the things that I learned based on what didn't work over the years as well.
Yeah. So, do you mind sharing? I don't want to get too personal. Some of the things that were causing your son to be suspended.
Oh my gosh, all the things. So it was, I mean, he got suspended, like I said, more days than he was in, but I mean, it would be little things like being too playful and throwing things in the classroom, or running away, or not coming in on the playground, that would then escalate into bigger things. He was a, highly active sensory seeking kid. He was also highly verbal, so he could tell you all the things he should be doing, but then in the class he wasn't doing them. And then he also really struggled socially. So he was really, he would soak in all these things that were happening around him, and then he would just explode with all the behaviors. So there was
Mm.
a lot of aggression. There was, eloping across the playground onto busy streets. I mean, there was all sorts of things that were really dangerous behaviors, and I understand why there were suspensions. But it just became a place where he felt terrible. He hated who he was, and he would come home and say, "I just wish I wasn't this way. I just wish I could die. I just wish I wish I didn't live. I wish I could be like all the other kids." And that's when I knew that there was a big problem.
Yeah. And what you said, what he expressed to you
Mhm.
is, I wish I didn't behave this way.
Mhm.
That to me speaks so many volumes, because what
Yeah.
I think too many educators and really society in general doesn't understand is that a lot of times, most of the time, the kids who are having these big behaviors or even these repetitive little behaviors, they don't want to do that.
No, absolutely not. And I would say even, there are some experts out there now that are saying, well, you need to know why the behavior is happening so that you can determine if it's on purpose, or if it's, coming from a deeper place or a challenge. And I would say all behaviors. If you can approach all behaviors with this different perspective and different lens of, my child wants to do better. My child wants to be successful. My child wants to have friends and wants to follow along. But at the same time, they're not able to, or they don't have the skills. They're not able to access all of the amazing tools we're giving them. And we really have to dig deeper and figure out what and why it's happening.
Yes, I do trainings in school districts, and as I said, I'm a master IEP coach, and I work with families all across the country. And something that just gets under my skin faster than any other error, or I don't know what else to call it in an IEP, but is when they write a functional behavioral assessment and then the subsequent behavior intervention plan, that it is a performance deficit.
Mhm.
I have tried to get schools to understand that it's 99.9% of the time a skill deficit. It's not a performance, because the performance deficit definition is they know how to do it, they just don't do it.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I don't agree that it's a
We can talk
performance
about
deficit.
some of that. We've developed after working with thousands of people around the world. And so it's not just my own son. Now that we've done Calm the Chaos and we've really created these formulas and ways to, they're frameworks so that, because we know that every kid is individual, every kid is different, and there's a different need behind every child. However, there are patterns that start to emerge when you have tens of thousands of people that you've helped and worked with. And so we have developed some things that I'd love to share that kind of shake up the IEP process a little bit, that kind of turn the functional behavior assessment, the ABCs, or the antecedent behavior and consequence, on its head a little bit, and then also the root cause, right? Like the antiquated, the four functions of behavior, it just misses so many pieces of why behavior is happening. And even just saying it's skill based, I think, yes, there is a skill lacking there, but what if it's not just a skill? What if they're missing the need for safety? And so many of our kids, especially after the last 2 years, and especially our neurodivergent kids, our kids with trauma, all of those kids, they're missing that basic need of belonging and safety. And so that's not necessarily a skill. That's something that a core basic need that they're missing. And we don't put that in IEPs of how they're going to get that basic need met and how we're going to get, or I'm just saying in typical IEP
Sure.
meetings, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about how to help the kids feel safer. We're not talking about how to help them feel connected and belong. We're not talking about how to meet those sensory needs. We're starting to. The sensory stuff is getting so much more prevalent, but at the same time, the sensory is almost like, a lot of times it's hung as like a gift, as like, well, if you're behaving in class, then you can use the sensory outlets. And it's like, wait a second, what? Or we don't want them to escape too much to the sensory room. And so,
Yeah, right,
it gets used against the kid
right.
when it really is the need that's under there. And then the skills. Yeah, what skills are they missing? So I think there's so much to look at here. And I think that if all schools had this systematic way of kind of looking at behavior in a totally different way, then it could be really powerful for so many of our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. We have Fran joining us from Southern Illinois. So I just wanted to say, hey, Fran, thanks for joining us. And if anyone else is joining us, if you would please let us know in the comments. Let us know hashtag live if you're watching live, hashtag replay if it's the replay, and let us know where you're from. And if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat and I will do exactly what I just did for Fran's comment. I will pop it up and make sure Dayna sees it and that she can answer that question for you. I
Yeah.
so agree with what you said about there being more than those 4, 5, however many, depending on which school of thought you're
Mhm.
following, of the functions of behavior. I actually do trainings on behavior for teachers, and I just did one the other day, and I said, we do that. We find those. We want to classify. Oh, the function is sensory, or attention seeking, or power struggle, or access to tangibles, or escape.
Mhm.
And I say, but we need to go further.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
I become a 2-year-old with attention deficit disorder when I start trying to figure out behaviors, because I'm like, well, why did they do that? What's the underlying cause? Well, what caused that? Well, how come they're doing this? And oh, did you notice that they did this over here? And I mean, to me, it's a huge puzzle.
Yeah. Well, I would love to share something that might help if you're
Yeah,
interested. Okay,
absolutely. Yes, please.
so I'm going to back up just a little bit and share. And since we're live, I'm going to go ahead and share my doodles, but I know on the podcast that might not be possible. So
Right.
I'll just go ahead and I'll make sure that I take pictures of these so you can have them as show notes or something like that.
Oh, perfect.
Let me
Thank you.
back up a little bit and just share. Remember how I said we figured out that you could boil down parenting or raising or educating the most challenging kids into these 4 pillars or these 4 elements? I like to think of it like ingredients, like baking a cake. You can make the most elaborate cake or the most simple cake, but they're all really based on flour, milk, eggs, right? Like they all kind of
Right.
have a similar base to them.
Right.
And then as you get, experienced and you got really good at it, you can start adding in other alternatives and things like that. So what we found is that it really comes down to these 4 key ingredients. And the interesting thing is that you actually need all 4. not just one of them. And so what these are is the first one is you, the adult. So one adult that sees the kid for who they are, that accepts the kid that's in front of them, not the kid they want to be in front of them. And then that is able to like anchor themselves, remain calm, but really is going to like put in that fight for the kid and really sees that kid for who they need to be, or who they believe they can be. And then the next piece is connection. So, and there's a lot of talk about connecting and making sure that our kids are connected and attached and feel belonging and all of those things. And teachers do a phenomenal job of that, of building a classroom that feels connected. But I think connection also comes to our nonverbal communication. It also comes down to that feeling of safety, those connection safety points. And then also just, does a child feel like they're seen and heard and they're understood and they can be who they are and not be judged and shamed for who they are? And I think that is a big piece of connection that gets missed so often, especially with our most challenging kids. And then the part that, I mean, anyone that deals with IEPs, and like, as you've said, this piece is so important, is that understanding piece. And this one gets missed with some people, but those of us that are, can geek out on behaviors and on neuroscience and on, neurodiversity and trauma and all those things, right? We can really geek out on the understanding piece. But I think that it's really important that we all have this base level understanding that, like we were talking about earlier, is all behavior is communication. There's always a reason for why things are happening. And then the final piece, and this one actually I feel like gets missed quite a bit, and it is the empowerment piece. And the empowerment piece, I feel like a lot of times it gets, we either jump to it. And that, what I mean by that is we say, here's these growth mindset tools, here's these calm down tools, here's these strategies. And we believe that that is empowering our kids, but we haven't taught them the skills of how to be aware, or how to access, or how to calm down, or how to communicate in a way where others can listen and hear them. We haven't problem solved with them. We're just giving them the plan and the tools instead of creating it with them. So this is where that collaboration and problem solving and really coming up with the plan together comes in. Now, this was really useful for my son. It was really useful for when we first started Calm the Chaos for quite a long time. However, it's not just this. If we just do this, it can still feel really overwhelming to do all four of those. And so what we found is that there's actually, in combination with this framework, you need what we call a roadmap. So we've identified 5 key stages that every parent, educator goes through when raising a challenging kid. And you use this same framework to create plans at each level of the stage, but it's kind of like baking the cake. Right here, it's super easy box level, like I'm just grabbing a box and I'm doing the most simplest cake I can because my life is like in utter chaos. And then down here, now that I've got connection, now that I've got trust, now that I've got buy-in, now I can create this elaborate cake that takes, multiple layers and includes multiple steps and things like that. So it's kind of the scaffolding that has been missing in so many of these, of the advice that's out there. And so the first one we do is we call it Ride the Storm. And your goal here really is just making sure everyone is safe, you and the child and the other children around. And the second one is actually one that we see missed so much, and it's actually time and energy. So this is making sure that you, the adult, has the time and energy to be able to handle any of the storms that are coming, that are able to access your own calming strategies, that are able to get everyone to their calm place. Once you have those two in place, now we can jump to where so many of us try to start, which is the in the moment, where a kid is having their biggest behavior problem, their biggest challenge, and it's what to say, what to do, what to provide, how to respond in the moment without breaking that connection and while helping the child get through it as quickly as they can. But it's not problem solving and it's not fixing and it's not doing any of those things. That comes next in and ahead of the moment where you're starting to problem solve with the child and you're starting to do something we call huddles, where you're talking with the kid, you're addressing concerns, you're collaborating, you're coming up with plans, you're tweaking those plans. And then, and one of the important things is you're starting to really expand your knowledge of their behavior. Instead of like up here, you just know all behavior is communication. You don't need to do all that digging that you and I do all the time, right? And it's not until down here you start looking at what are the causes? Okay, what could possibly be under there? And you're making your hypothesis. And then here you're actually starting to unravel it. And you're starting to say, oh, when this happens, that happens. When this happens, that happens, right? And you're starting to make plans for those. And then finally, we call this last one, when I'm working with families, I call this the family team stage, but it would still be the team stage if we're talking about a classroom as well. But it's really just where everyone's working together and they understand each other's struggles, their superpowers, their triggers, their likes, their dislikes, their sensory preferences, and they're accommodating and advocating and empowering each other to work together. So this is where your routines and your rules and things like that start coming into place instead of starting here. You're really starting working on you first.
Right. And like any journey, what I think, I don't think that this point gets missed, but I think the planning and the patience for the journey isn't there often, because in a classroom of 20 or 30 or more children,
Yep.
the teachers feel like they need quick fixes.
Yep.
And they don't have the time. I don't want to say that they don't take the time, because I think if they could, they would.
Absolutely.
But because they don't have the time, it makes it very difficult for that whole process to take the amount of time that it really needs to take. Because I'll be honest, I took a cake decorating class and it was, 5 weeks, an hour each time, and I learned all the basics. Now I could bake cakes for my daughter and have night. Of course, she didn't like the icing, so I didn't use the skill for very long. But if I had stuck with it, I could be a very elaborate cake decorator by now. But I didn't stick with it. I didn't continue to use the skills, and I'm still just a basic cake decorator. And, to make that very beautiful cake can take years sometimes. And not every day, every moment of every part of each of those years, but over time. And too often we just don't have the availability to do that.
And I would say that it hasn't been a skill that most of us adults have been taught. So I would say that for that, it really is that executive functioning piece for adults. So how to build these plans one baby step at a time, how to restart, how to tweak, how to pick one focus and just focus on that, how to, keep moving forward when days get hard. I don't think that we were ever trained. I know I wasn't trained on how to do that. And so that's why we slow down in our process and say, okay, wait, yeah, we want to make sure we can get you through like your biggest storms right now, like, and get you through the chaotic days that you're having and the big behaviors and the big blowups and arguments and fights and whatever's happening. But at the same time, we need to move you quickly into creating a plan where you can create time for yourself, because you're right, none of us have the time. So we have to find a way that we can boost our own energy and that we can have more just availability, even if it's not physical time on the calendar, just more availability to access our own tools and to access, our own knowledge, like you said. And even if it was just like for 5 minutes a day, you would practice making flowers. Like if that was one thing that you did every single day, you would be a master at making flowers, even
Right.
if you weren't doing all the things. And so it's picking that one little piece that you can keep working on. And I think, and I was a teacher, so I understand like all the things that are put on top of teachers. And I think really when teachers are coming in, we're coming in with this perfect scenario, and we're hoping that's what our classroom's going to look like, and we're building this beautiful environment, and we're having class meetings, and we're having all these things that to make the classroom be this inclusive and inviting and place of belonging. But if we don't have plans for things that are going to go wrong, and the kids haven't helped create those, and if we don't have a plan in the moment of what we're going to say and do that's not going to escalate things higher, if we don't have the time and energy, and by time, I'm not meaning more hours in the day, but just literally the time to stop and pause and say what plans are needed. And then if we don't have our like emergency plans of like, this is what we're going to do when like crap hits the fan, and that we have a formula to follow at each of these stages, then I think that's where it feels overwhelming. It feels chaotic. It feels stressful. And so that's something that I really love for people to take away after I'm talking, is just that this is baby steps, like you were talking about. And it's no matter where you are in your journey, that if you just, if you meet a challenge, we call them chaos causers, but if you meet a challenge, think, okay, how can I shift my thoughts? All right, connect. How can I provide more moments of safety? We call them moments of safety. So how can I like do a body scan and provide more connection even in a difficult moment? All right, how can I understand where this is coming from? Well, like he's throwing stuff at me. I can't really ask him questions right now, so I can stay curious. Okay, how can I empower him? Well, I can't empower him right now, but afterwards I can, right? And so if we can just remember those four ingredients, no matter what stage we're at, then we have got a great formula for dealing with all sorts of challenges, no matter the unique child you're dealing with, the family situation, the background, any of those things.
Yeah, it's so key, and it's something that as a special education teacher, I absolutely had the time to take to learn all of those kinds of things. And even still, in the early stages of me working with kids with unwanted behaviors, it still took me longer than I wished it would have.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell stories on myself when I do these behavior trainings that, it's like, well, I had this one student who did this, and it was like a whole year later before we figured out, oh my gosh, we've helped him. This was what we thought he needed, and we taught him this, and he's applying it in this situation, and that's not how he's supposed to respond in that situation. And so unfortunately, in my experience, maybe with your system it is foolproof, but in my experience, sometimes we don't get it right.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a lot of experimenting, but I also think that, like I said, we've seen thousands of people use this system. We've seen parents, teachers, therapists, doctors, all sorts of people use this system. And it really is fail proof. One, because we don't believe in failure. We believe any information that you get is a step towards, learning and information and what you can do differently. So, and then the other reason is because it does take all that science and it gives you a system, a way to kind of, so let me just show you. I think that's going to be easier. So, most of us have seen the memes of the iceberg theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of, if you have an iceberg, you only see 1/7 above the surface, and it's what's under the surface that really matters. And under the surface, you could have, you see all these memes that have like 500 reasons that could
Right.
be under there. And I feel like sometimes we are guessing. We're saying, well, it's autism, or well, it's emotions, or well, it's trauma, or well, it's this, or well, it's this skill. And so let's just address that one that we think it is, because, how are you supposed to choose? And so that's one of the things that I really needed to figure out to help my son was, what order do I need to be going in to figure these things out? Because it did feel like I was kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall to figure it out. And so what we came up with was something that we call the behavior funnel. So think of it just like sifting for gold, right? You're going to put the behavior, the challenge, the struggle in the top, and you're going to sift through with different size sifters. And so the first one is going to allow most of the things to fall through. And you're looking at its process of elimination. And the very first stage here is basic needs. So it's those things, that we all know are kids that don't have food, that don't have shelter, that need to toilet, that are tired, or any of those things. They're not going to be able to access learning until those needs are met. But the thing that we were talking about earlier that so many people miss is that basic need of safety and security. And so that's where, if there's any sort of like, I had a plan and you changed it on me, or there's something that was unplanned, there's something that I don't understand, there's something that I am fearful of, there's something I have anxiety over, something I'm worried about, something even that I'm excited about, but it makes me feel like I'm on edge, I'm not sure where things are going, you're going to see a lot of behaviors come out of this basic needs category. And so we always have everyone start there. Are the basic needs being met? Are they tired? Are they hungry? Do they need to go to the bathroom? Like, just as a surpriser, like my son, the behaviors were coming when he needed to go to the bathroom. He would get super hyper and he would touch everything because he didn't have that interoceptive sense to be able to say, "Oh, I have that weird feeling in my body, and that means I need to go to the bathroom." And he would never have accidents or anything like that, but his behavior would change. And if I said, "Hey, buddy, how long's it been since you went to the bathroom?" He'd be like, "Oh, yeah." And then he'd go to the bathroom and they would like immediately calm down.
Yeah.
So we always have people check basic needs first.
I'm gonna interrupt you for just a second. One of the things that you said that I want to bring out and really emphasize just for a second is the fact that even when kids are looking forward to something because they're excited about something, they could still have unwanted behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
I think we tend to have this belief, well, but you want to go to Disney, or you want to have Christmas break, or you want to do this. Why, you shouldn't be having these behaviors now. And it's excitement and nervous are the same. Our body expresses it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
our little guys don't necessarily know that or understand that. They just know that their body is like on fire almost, and they don't know how to necessarily express it. So I just wanted to really hone in on that for a second. So I apologize for interrupting.
No. Yeah, stop me, please. I can just like geek out on this, like I said. Keep going. And so please interrupt me or say, "Dayna, you're telling us too much," whatever. So
no, this is fantastic.
Okay. So the next piece is that connection piece that we talked about, right? One of the most basic human needs is to feel belonging and to feel like you are a part of something bigger than you. And so that connection piece is so important. And so often I have parents, they'll tell me, "But we are connected. We do our one-on-one time, or we play games, or we do that. And it doesn't matter. I can connect till I'm blue in the face." And typically this means that the kid doesn't feel seen or heard. And that's a really important part, is that are their opinions heard? It doesn't mean they always have to get what they want, but are their opinions heard? What are your facial expressions when you walk into the room? In a classroom, what are your facial expressions? And one thing that came to light here with my son is that, there's this misconception that when you're autistic, you don't have any social cues, or you don't recognize emotions and things like that. And I actually think he had this massive overload of emotions coming at him, and out of the situation, he could define them 100%, which is why he didn't get diagnosed till 11. But one of the things is that he would make his own interpretations about the signals that I was sending. So if I was sick and I had a groggy voice, he thought I was mad at him. If I was stressed out and tired and my eyes were like this in the morning, he thought I was really angry and about to go off on him. And then he would do something, then I'd go off on him. So, he would get the reaction that he thought he was going to get.
Yeah.
Right? And so self-fulfilling prophecy, 100%. And so when we think of connection, the first thing we have parents do is say, check your own your own signals of connection. Like, what are you sending out non-verbally? Are you crossing your arms? Are you standing over them? Are you clenching your fist? Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders raised? Is your voice louder? Like, all those things send signals of disconnection instead of signals of connection. And so we definitely want to check that. And when we're looking at solving a bigger behavior, we want to look at, are these kids connected to other people? Are they connected to their teacher? Are they connected to, did they have a big fight with someone in class? Did they not get invited to the party that everybody else is talking about?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that connection piece can be so big and be such a big fear for so many kids. And so we have to check that piece next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, again, I 100% agree with that. And I tell teachers all the time, if your students are walking into your classroom, at a different time of the day, and you don't express your happiness, or they don't feel welcome that they're in your classroom, how they behave and how much they learn is drastically going to be different than, all if they just walk into your classroom mid-morning for the very first time and you say, "Hey, Dayna, welcome," or you wave. If you're talking and you're teaching, you can't stop and say hi, but if you somehow acknowledge that person and you have a space for them, with their name on it, and this is where they go and this is where they keep their stuff, that's huge for making them feel like, I have a place here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm safe here. I'm welcome here.
And helping them connect with just one safe person in the building, or one kid in the classroom that's their safe place. My daughter is really struggling with anxiety this year, and she had one kid in her class last year that it was a new school, and they just were peas in a pod. They were the best friends, and they are not in the same class this year. And my daughter is really struggling to go to school this year. And one of her suggestions when we huddled about it was, well, this little girl was like my friend, and she made me feel safe. So if I was struggling, I would tell her, and if she was struggling, she would tell me. And they didn't feel safe enough to then tell the teachers, but they could work on it together. And when I presented that to the school, they were like, well, we don't change kids' classrooms just for friends. I'm like, this isn't just about friendship. This is about her feeling safe in the environment. So, and I asked, I'm like, does my daughter participate in class? And they're like, yeah, all the time. And I said, okay, but does she ever ask for help? And they were like, no, never. She never asked for help. Matter of fact, she broke her arm in October at school. She fell, broke it in two places, two bones. And she finished out the whole day of school, never telling them how bad it hurt.
Oh my gosh.
How many of our kids are doing that? How many of our people-pleasing, calm kids are doing that? Right? So it's not
Yeah.
always the big behaviors. It's not always the bad behaviors. But that kid that's not going to school, that kid that's not, my daughter's probably never going to get a diagnosis outside of maybe generalized anxiety disorder. Maybe. She's never really going to get another diagnosis that's going to land her an IEP. And she's got straight A's. She's not going to, right? It's not affecting her grades. But at the same time, she needs support. She needs accommodations, and she needs understanding and a safe place to land. And I think that is such an important piece that gets missed at home and at school, because we're a little prideful as adults, right? We're
Oh,
like, no,
definitely.
I create a good space. I create a good environment. Like, of course
Right.
they feel safe here. And I think if we can just remove that, stay curious and say, how can I make my environment safer for this one child? I think it can be really impactful.
Yeah, and that's so true what you said. And your daughter sounds like me growing up, because
Mhm.
I did have lots of, just, I don't feel well, and I couldn't necessarily put it into words, and then it would develop into a stomach problem. And when I was growing up, anxiety wasn't a word on medical professionals' minds, and
Yeah.
so they would run all these physical tests on me, and they would come up clean and nothing wrong with me physically. And so the doctors would tell my mom, well, she's just making it up, she just doesn't want to go to school, it's all in her head. And they were right, but they didn't know that they were right, in the sense of, yeah, it was anxiety, which is in my head. And yeah,
Still very real. It's still
yeah,
a part of what's going on. And I am supposed to be this parenting expert, right? We took our daughter to the doctor just to make sure that there were no underlying things because she's been really sick this year and then hasn't wanted to go to school. We wanted to make sure there was nothing we were missing
Right.
under the surface medically. And the doctor looked at my husband and said, "This is not a medical problem. This is a parenting problem."
Wow.
I would never allow my daughter to miss school like this, and I would never let her manipulate me like this.
Right.
Let me give you a recommendation for a behavioral therapist, right? That sort of thing is happening all over the world with parents. Parents are then feeling like a failure. The kids feel like they're broken. And really, we just need a better understanding and awareness that all these behaviors are coming from somewhere, and we need to give voice to it, and we need to give language to it so our kids can describe it, so that we can describe it, and so our kids can get their needs met.
Right. And what you said before about, it's real, you know,
Mhm.
something that I talk to teachers and other training that I do is collaborating with parents. And I say one of the key things that parents want is to be valued, respected, and heard. That's what teachers want. That's what kids want. That's
It's
what
fun.
we all want,
Yeah.
and so maybe you don't think that if you were dealing with what I was dealing with, you wouldn't have the same reaction. That's okay. That's you. But my reaction is allowed to be different.
Mhm.
And, can we work through it? Absolutely. But validate the fact that it's real to me.
Yeah.
And I'm
100%.
having to go through whatever it is to figure out, to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really think that that's huge. I think that goes along with that connection, that making them feel safe. It's definitely those top two tiers that you're talking about.
Yeah, and so the third tier is one that, I mean, as a special education teacher, I know you know a lot about it, but this one gets missed a lot is that sensory component. And that's the sensory overwhelm, but it's also the sensory needs that aren't getting met. And especially after 2 years of our kids working at home and getting to lay down to do their work and getting to walk around with their computer and getting to do their schoolwork in 2 hours instead of 6 hours. Like, and then right now it's like dark season around the United States, and it's cold and it's gross and rainy, and so kids aren't getting outside, and there's so many pieces here that get missed. And this can go two ways. If you know about sensory, you jump to it and you skip basic needs and connections so often
Right.
because you're like, it's got to be sensory. Or you just skip it altogether if you're not in the special education world because you are thinking, well, my kid is a typical kid. So my kid doesn't have
Right.
sensory needs, whereas we all have sensory needs. And I actually believe, I truly believe that if every human understood the 8 sensory systems and how they affect how we show up in our world and how we interact with our world, we would have a radically different world.
I think so.
Way more compassion and understanding, just that one piece, because it really does explain how we interact with other people and how we interact with the at the grocery store and how we interact in line for at the post office. All those things are so sensory related.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You mentioned lines. And I think about how awful we are to kids because we make them get in lines all the time to go here and go there. And I get it for chaos, for order. You have to have that. But if you're in line at the grocery store, it's maybe 10 minutes and then you're done. And you don't have to go back to the grocery store for several days or weeks. But if you're in class and you're in school and somebody that you don't like is always right in front of you or always right behind you every single time you line up, we expect you to still behave perfectly
Yeah.
and show all the wanted behaviors and be happy about it.
Well, and we don't want you to touch anything, and we don't want you to
Right.
run, and we don't want you to skip, and we don't want you to turn backwards. We don't want you to talk to your neighbor,
Right.
and like in line at the grocery store, even in line, like for, let's say there's a big event and I've got to wait to get in because, like I'm thinking a concert or something.
Right. Yeah.
Even with that, there is personal space between every single person, or like if I go to Disney World or something like that, there is personal space between each family grouping, and that is not necessarily true in a school line. And also, you're touching things like you're getting in your bag, you're scrolling your phone, you're touching your kids, like you're checking things out in the checkout line, like you're doing something with your hands and your body as you wait, where our kids are like hands to your side, eyes forward, stand in your square. Like there's so much there. And then we're like, they couldn't walk to, and sometimes I've seen that as goals in IEPs of like being able to transition from one classroom to another without, out
Right.
with big behaviors or whatever. And it's like,
Right.
oh gosh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, and I'll admit it. I mean, as a teacher, I've definitely been one of those teachers, especially like the 3 and 4 year olds when I do my
Yeah.
subbing now, which is mostly when I'm in the classrooms. I'm not full time anymore, and so I'm like, okay, what's the little saying? Hands behind your back, bubble on your mouth, whatever, because every like schoolroom has a different way of doing it. But and again, I know I get it. It's for order, and it's so that you're not disturbing every other classroom as you're walking down the hall, but we need to know that. And so that when we get to our destination or before we leave to go to where our destination, that we gotta get some of that out, and acknowledge that, okay, Shelly needs to twiddle her hair while she's walking, or she needs to, do whatever. And I'm totally guilty of that when I would take my kids down the hall, because I was very much a walk with your hands behind your back, so that I can just tell you to put your hands behind your back, which is in a positive way, instead of don't touch that, keep your hands off of so and so, but it was okay, we got to get the jiggly and the wigglies out, and the talking and all that stuff before we go, and maybe sometimes once we get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to go through the last three pretty quickly, because I think it's what a lot of times we look at for what are the needs. And that is, you talked about it here, is skills. Like, what are the skills that you're lacking? Is there executive functioning? Is there an emotional regulation? Is there an awareness? Is there actually writing, or is there a reading or verbal communication? Like, there's so many skills that could
Oh yeah.
happen. And so at that point, you're kind of just looking at the other information to help you identify which skill. But I'll tell you, I would say 8 out of 10 of even the most dangerous behaviors that our parents struggle with, they are solved in the first 3 layers. And then we can start building skills. But these first 3 are the ones. That's why I always say, like, no, process of elimination. Go through basic needs first, then connection, then sensory, then skills. And then we're not going to forget about the old desires and avoidance, because those are still important. Those are still there, right? Like, if I really love glittery, shiny things, and I have all my basic needs met, and I have great connection, and I've gotten my sensory needs met, and I've even got great communication skills, but I see that it over there is like this real cool, shiny, glittery unicorn, I might get out of my seat and go get that shiny unicorn because I just really love it. I just want it, right? And so we don't want to ignore that. We also don't want to ignore, my daughter has a strong desire to please people. And so there might be a personality trait here. There are other children who have a strong desire to lead, to know the plan, to know what's going to happen. Like, knowing those desires are so important, but we don't want to start there. And then avoidance, we don't want to start there either, right? We want to know, why are they avoiding? And if they're not avoiding because of basic needs or connection or sensory or skills, or because they desire something else, now we can look at, okay, it's just a basic, like, they just don't like this. And that's okay. My husband, we just got back from Hawaii, and my husband did not go on most of the tours that we went on. And there was no amount of connection or basic needs or skill development that I could have given him. He just doesn't like boats, and he doesn't like water. And so he was like, nope, I'm out. And he didn't go on the turtle tour. He didn't go on the whale watching tour. Even though he thought whales were cool and turtles were cool, they didn't trump the, like, I don't like boats, right? Like, they just didn't trump that avoidance. And so we have to still take those into account, but they are that last tier instead of the first tier that so often we go to, is they avoid it because they just don't want to do it, or they're doing this just because they want that power, they want that attention, right? And so I'm kind of shifting that a little bit and saying, let's wait to look at those and wait to jump to that conclusion.
It aggravates me so much when I am doing an IEP level up review and I see a goal in there, and the goal statement is Shelly can do this for preferred tasks, but if it's an unpreferred task, she does not perform this. I'm like, you know what? That makes it sound like it's a very negative thing. And every single one of us have unpreferred tasks. I mean, I can look right now and see 3 loads of baskets of laundry that need to be folded.
Yeah,
And
I don't do laundry. I don't
it's
do
not
laundry.
my
I don't
favorite.
do dishes. I
Yeah.
don't do any cleaning in my house. None. Why? Because I have like really low executive functioning skills. And I can use those executive functioning skills when it's going to get my book written, when it's going to get me on this like podcast and make sure I'm organized for that, when it's going to build my team, when it's going to help my family plan a trip. I can get my executive functioning in order for that because it's really important to me. But if it's undesired, like, yeah, I have no desire to wash my clothes. None. I could care less. Like, I don't care if I'm dirty. Like, that's, you guys have to deal with me stinking. I don't care. Right. But again, that's my ADHD brain, poor executive functioning. But how many of our kids are like that too?
Right. Right. Exactly. And something that, a lot of times I will talk about too is, you know, we have to have external motivators sometimes. We all want our students to be intrinsically motivated to just do it because it's the right thing to do, or because that's what you're supposed to do right now, or at this age, or whatever. And I can walk by those baskets of laundry that I just mentioned, and nothing necessarily will prompt me any faster than if I know somebody's coming over. Because then I'm like, oh, they're going to come. Even if it's my own daughter who, just moved out several months ago. And I'm like, oh, Violet's coming home. I got to, and she's bringing her boyfriend, and I got to, this has to be done, and the dishes have to be done. And boom. I mean, like, I can get amazing amounts of things done in 10 minutes before
Oh, yeah.
somebody's going to arrive.
Yeah. But again,
I
love what you just said here, because I think there's a missing piece is so many people are like, well, we want our kids to be intrinsically, but we need an external. So we'll do rewards and charts and things like that. But what you're saying is there's a real motivator, a real life thing that they care about that is happening. And so I like to really, when we're making plans and we're collaborating with our kids, I'm always like, what are they wanting? Like, what are they wanting to solve? What are they wanting to be able to do? If they could live their best life, what would they do? Oh, they'd want to play electronics all day. Okay. All right. Well, in order to have enough time to play electronics in the morning, we need to boom, 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 boom. Great. Awesome. Those things are done. Now you've got an hour to play electronics before school. Right. But it's not a reward. It's really like, what is important to you? What are you wanting to do? What is it that's motivating you? And just like you said, your daughter's coming. So you're like, all right, in order for my daughter to come and see a clean house and I care about that, then I'm going to do, I'm so the same way. I totally get it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So we only have about 9 minutes left.
Okay.
I try not to go more than an hour, but I could so talk to you all day long. I do want to share just really quickly. You do have 2 different websites that people can go to. So I want you to talk about each one, and tell kind of what they're going to find when they go to Lemon Lime Adventures and what they're going to see when they go to Meltdown Mastery. In fact, I will share both of them while you're talking about them.
All right. So Lemon Lime Adventures is just our blog that we started almost 10 years ago now. So that's where you're going to find over 1,000 articles on how to parent challenging kids. You're going to find all of our free resources, any of our workshops that we have going on, just all the things are going to be right there. And you've got it up on my about page, but you'll also see all kinds of things as well. So when you when you go to meltdownmastery.com, which is the other link that you have up, meltdownmastery.com is our leading free workshop that we have going on. And it's where I'll walk you through the 5 biggest traps and pitfalls that we see even the best parents fall into when dealing with challenging behavior. And so I'll actually walk you through the 4 ingredients like I just did today. I'll walk you through how to create an in the moment plan for a big chaos causer, tantrum, meltdown, outburst, and then walk you through how to shift from maybe how you've been trying to do things in the past, why they're not working, and what to do instead.
That is awesome. And I love your website. It's so informative, and are all of these your doodles?
They are my doodles.
I love that you teach in pictures as well as in words, because it's incredible the imagery that you share and how that really helps people have a little bit better grasp of what you're talking about. 8 years and over 200,000 kids.
Yes, we
Dayna,
have
that is
had.
amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that number has probably grown at this point. But when we count all the people who've gone through our free workshops, all the people who have put this into action, yeah, it's well over multiple hundreds of thousands of people.
That's incredible. And that's why I'm having you here today. And I'm so excited to have you here today, because your methods are proven. Your methods are valuable. But like I said, I had to stop following you because I was afraid that I was going to start being Dayna's copy. And and
Well, there's a few
everything.
things. I mean, it's based on, like I said before, it's based on those four ingredients. Everything I teach is based on those four ingredients. And those four ingredients are based on like just best practices in being a human. Like that's the best way I know how to describe it. And so there's going to be a ton of overlap in lots of places. Now, I'll know, right, if there's behavior funnel or the behavior spiral, which we didn't get to. Like those are things that we've developed, tools we've developed specifically. But at the same time, like there's going to be a lot of overlap and I'm okay with that. So please follow me back again.
Okay, I will. As long as you've given me permission and you know.
Of course. I
Because
mean, I'm
yeah.
about to. So in August of 2023, the Calm the Chaos book comes out, and I'm super excited about it. And I lay it all out there. I mean, I put every single step, every single like step one, do this, step two, do this. And I walk you through the entire roadmap that I showed you today and give you everything. I lay out every single plan. So obviously I'm giving it away all in the book. So I'm not afraid of people taking the information and sharing that with their audiences and with teachers that they know and love and with families that they know and love, because, I want I go back to why I started doing this. And I started doing this because I felt like a failure. My son felt broken. And I don't want any parent to feel like a failure. And I don't want any child to feel broken. And that's really why I do this. So if I can get that message out to as many people as possible in any way, whether it comes through your voice or someone else's, like, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm so appreciative, and I am not as known as you are, but I'm always happy to share. In fact, I did a presentation earlier today, and I had several people reach out to me and ask for the PowerPoint slides, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to make it that easy for you. I'll give them to you in a PDF, but I do. I'm like you, like I want that information out there. The same thing with my book that I wrote and released in 2020 is like, I want to put that in people's hands. I
Yeah.
want people to learn from it and to grow from it and to change the mindset.
Yeah.
Because I really think now mine doesn't lay out behaviors, but I really think it's so important for us to have mindset shifts,
Oh, 100%.
because
Yeah.
otherwise we're going to be stuck where we are.
Yeah.
And it's not the greatest place to be. There's so much beyond where we're at my hashtag no limits. That let's keep expanding, let's keep growing, let's keep reaching for the greatest potential of every one of our students. And think of the world that we would have
Mhm.
if everybody had a different mind shift about behaviors specifically, because I think that's the biggest frustration that our teachers deal with.
Mhm.
Maybe the paperwork, but
But it's
especially
just
our
the
teachers.
paperwork around the behavior.
Right, exactly. But I do agree with you what you mentioned earlier, that we're not trained well enough to
Mhm.
know how to deal with a lot of these things. And it is ever changing, and we do have more trauma informed practices happening now. But I do think a lot of the change is going to have to come at the university level,
Mhm.
because we're going to have to do a better job of training our new teachers and continuing. I mean, we have to, as teachers, continue our education and continue our development, but we have to change people's hearts too. I
Yeah,
don't
and
think
I
you
would
can.
say, just to add on to that, like if there is a teacher watching this, if there's a parent watching this and you're like, I'm just one parent, I'm just one teacher, like there's no way I'm going to affect change. I just want to encourage you because I have seen massive change happen and the ripple effects that happen when a parent takes this information and empowers their child, and then their child goes to school and says, they're at school and one kid is really struggling and they say, well, I noticed that you're really struggling with this. I wonder if we should do a huddle together and find out our concerns. And then they huddle together in the classroom and they come up with a plan together, right? That then ripples into other classrooms, and then that ripples into other buildings and beyond, and into workplace and things like that. And so you have the power to change the world just as being one person. And I believe that you can change you can change yourself, your own mindset, and then you can change a child's life, which then will change the world. And so don't think that you're too small. Don't think that you're not enough to make that change. Every little voice matters and every little step you take matters.
Absolutely. And every movement has always been started by one person.
Yeah.
Dayna, thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you so very much for being with me today and sharing with my audience. And Fran says thank you as well. And just really quickly, hopefully I can say this really fast. It's meltdownmastery.com and lemonlimeadventures.com. And that'll take you to her blog and to the free workshop where she'll teach you some of the same things that she taught you today. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much.